Sports Illustrated senior writer Chris Mannix with me now here on Sportsnot to talk about the Knicks, who are off to a 5-3 start. Knicks fans elated. Couple of speed bumps as of late, couple of losses here, Chris. But overall, you write that there may be room for optimism with this team. Why do you feel that way?
I mean, for the first time in a long time, the Knicks resemble a functional franchise. It's been years, if not decades, since we could say that about the New York Knicks. They had an offseason where they didn't go out and overspend on one particular player. They don't have any bad contracts on the books. They hired a really good coach in Tom Thibodeau, who has established a sense of discipline and a defensive identity with that team. And they're building through the foundation. And that's not something you've been able to say about the Knicks for a very long time.
Are they a playoff team this season?
Yeah, I think they have a ceiling of getting into the play-in tournament, which would be anywhere from the 6 to 10 range. And that would be a pretty big achievement. But even if they don't, they're doing all the right things and they're making all the right moves. This year is all about player development with the Knicks. You want to find out if RJ Barrett can be kind of your cornerstone player, your cornerstone scorer on this team. If Julius Randle is a part of your long-term future and not just a player on the roster to provide you offense for a couple of years. If any of the point guards, Frank Ntilikina or Dennis Smith, are worth keeping after this season. If Mitchell Robinson can be a defensive anchor for this team as he enters his contract year or his contract offseason this summer. If Kevin Knox in his third year in the league is worth keeping around for the long term. I mean, playoffs or no playoffs. If the Knicks can kind of discern what they have on this roster by the end of the season while looking like a credible franchise doing it, that is unquestionably a successful season.
And that's maybe likely the goal for Tom Thibodeau, who you mentioned. Does this solidify the fact, at least early on in this season, which has been crazy in a lot of different ways? I mean, certainly unusual coming off the pandemic. We've seen scores that have been unusual. We've seen teams that we haven't expected doing well so far. The Knicks may be an example of that early on. But has this solidified that Tom Thibodeau is exactly where he needs to be in a coaching role?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, Tom Thibodeau, outside of Larry Brown, Tom Thibodeau might be the least qualified human being on the planet to be a coach and a GM. Like, he just doesn't work in both jobs because his mind isn't kind of built to handle those types of responsibilities. But as an NBA coach, he is excellent. In talking to opposing coaches who went up against the Knicks in the last couple of days, they have all said that team plays really hard, and they were able to kind of steal some wins early in the season by playing harder than other teams. Now, their offense is terrible. They are the 30th ranked three-point shooting team in the league, and that's what happens when you don't have guys that can shoot three-point shots. So Tibbs isn't a miracle worker with this group, but he's able to get them to be a stout defensive team. He's turned Mitchell Robinson into a Tyson Chandler-like defensive anchor with this group. And he's really instilled a sense of confidence with them that if they follow the game plan as well as possible, they put themselves in a position to win. So look, there was some criticism of Thibodeau when he was first hired on this job. Was he just a buddy of Leon Rose, the new president of the Knicks, who used to be Thibodeau's agent with CAA? But Tibbs is proving that as a coach, strictly as a coach, he is an excellent, excellent teacher.
The Knicks front office has taken a beating over the last, I don't know, you can tell me better, but maybe decade plus, and probably rightly so. But are you impressed so far with Leon Rose, the executive that you mentioned, and some of the other decision makers who are hopefully carving out a path for Knicks fans in the future to have a more successful franchise moving forward?
Look, I was skeptical of Leon Rose, like many, when he took this job, because it seemed like a continuation of a trend that the Knicks have had of hiring people for this job with no experience of doing this job, whether it was Isaiah Thomas, Phil Jackson, Steve Mills, now Leon Rose, whose basketball experience comes from representing players. But one thing that's impressed me about Leon Rose is that he's hired people who have a depth of experience that he doesn't have. He hired Walt Perrin away from Utah, and Utah over the last 15, 20 years has been a drafting machine, and Walt Perrin has been a huge part of that. He is running their scouting department. He hired Frank Zanin, a former assistant GM in Brooklyn, who's widely respected across the league, to run the pro personnel side and figure out what they need with this group. And look, they signed the right guys in the offseason to short-term deals. Austin Rivers has been a very good player for them in the short term with this team. And look, it's still early in the season, but it looks like Emmanuel Quickly can play. And he was the 25th pick in the draft. If you can get a guy that can be part of your rotation with the 25th pick in the draft, that's a huge win if you're any franchise. And we still haven't seen enough from Obi Toppin, who's only played one game this season while he's battling injury. And Obi Toppin was widely considered a very good draft pick for the Knicks in the lottery just this past offseason. So, so far so good. I mean, every move that Leon Rose has made up until this point has been a good one, and that's not something you can often say about Knicks top executives.
Chris Mannix, senior writer at Sports Illustrated. Thanks for being with us.
You got it.